Hi everyone, I've been teaching guitar since the 90s and I see the same strumming mistakes time and time again. So today I'm going to show you how to spot those mistakes and how to avoid them. Stick around to the end because even advanced players get the last 2 points wrong. The first common mistake I see is people hold the pick wrong. They hold it like this with 2 fingers and the thumb. Now, I'm not saying that you can't do that because there's too many exceptions to the rule. However, they are exactly that, exceptions to the rule. For most people, you want to hold the pick between the thumb and the index finger only, like this. Now you'll notice that when I do this, I'm using the side of my index finger, not the fleshy part, okay? So I'm using the side of the finger, like so. Also, it's a good idea if you're a beginner to use a very floppy pick. If you use something too rigid, it's a little bit heavy-handed on the strings. As you get more advanced, then you can progress to a harder pick. Point number 2, this is the big one. This is the one everyone gets wrong, especially beginners. People tend to strum from the elbow or sometimes even the shoulder, and they shouldn't be doing that. You should be strumming from the wrist. Okay, now technically, when we're strumming from the wrist like this, it's actually the radius bone of the forearm moving across the ulna. Okay, but that manifests itself as a movement of the wrist. So I'm going to refer to it as strumming from the wrist, and you want that wrist to be super floppy, okay? The floppier your wrist is, the more it wants to bounce for you like this, okay? It doesn't resist the motion. If you're using your elbow, you're kind of pulling your own punches. You're fighting your own motion. The other problem with the elbow is it's too big a lever. It's making big motions, and we need some subtlety when we're strumming sometimes. You'll know if you're doing this right because if you're doing it right, your pick will remain over the strings at all times. If your pick travels from here to here, that's your elbow doing that. If it stays roughly over the strings, then you're using your wrist correctly. Another advantage of using the wrist and not the elbow is we don't want to attack the strings with our pick like that at 90 degrees to the strings. We want a slight lean. And that tends to happen naturally when we're using the wrist. It leans downwards as we go down, and as our wrist flicks outward like that, it then turns our pick the other way, ready for a nice lean on the way up. Be careful when you do an up strum that you are flicking your wrist back exactly the same as you did on the way down. Do not pull the pick up. That's actually a motion of the shoulder or the elbow. Make sure your wrist is always doing the work. Point number 3, your strumming hand should constantly be moving, even if you're not connecting with the strings. Essentially, this is your engine, and if your engine stops moving, it stalls. Let me give an example. Let's take a chord of E, and let's take something very simple, like a quaver strumming pattern like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, I'm counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The numbers I'm playing it down, and the ands I'm playing it up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Let's imagine that I remove all of those strums except beat 1. What you don't want to do is this. 1 and stop your wrist. Your engine has stalled, and it's going to be very awkward to have to start again on a downstroke when your pick is down there. So what you need to do is constantly move, even when you're not connecting with the strings, like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Let's have a look at the most common strumming pattern ever. This is a quaver strumming pattern. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that's the one I just played. What we can do is, a very common variation of this is to take this first and here, remove it, and you end up with this. 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. You notice I've drawn a kind of ghost arrow. That's to show you that your right hand should still be moving, even in that gap. Okay? So you get this kind of thing. 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2. I don't do this. I don't go 1 and stop and then come up on beat 2. I go 1, miss the strings, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, miss 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, miss 2 and 3 and 4 and. Of course, it's a good idea to practice this with a metronome. So here we go, 100 beats a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. Point number 4, when you're changing between chords, it's better to leave a chord early than arrive late. Let me show you what I mean. Let's take 2 chords that for a beginner are very difficult to move between, the chord of C and the chord of G. If I do quavers, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then move to the G, I don't want a gap. I don't want this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Wait till you find the chord. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. It doesn't sound right. So what we could do is we could just move instantly by practicing lots and lots, but it sounds kind of jerky. You get this 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. It doesn't feel right. So it's better to leave the first chord a bit early and you get this sound. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Move early. I'm exaggerating slightly. I'm moving a bit too early there, but the point is this hand doesn't know. This hand carries on strumming. And you get these open strings, which actually don't sound that bad, especially in a key of C where you've got lots of open notes available anyway. So 1 and 2 and 3, move early, 1 and 2 and 3, move early, 1 and 2 and 3, move early. It's much better to do that than arrive late. This is what it sounds like if you arrive late. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... It kind of interrupts my right hand. Point number 5, have a listen to these funky rhythms. What I'm doing there is I'm strumming a bar chord. A bar chord is great because I can play a chord and I can relax the chord completely, hit all the strings and get this percussive sound. Again, this hand never stops moving. People think when they do funky strumming that this hand is doing something clever. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it's just constantly moving, say quavers or semiquavers, like this. It's this hand, the fretting hand, that does the work. It squeezes or doesn't squeeze, so you get this kind of thing. Let me get my engine running. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and squeeze, squeeze, don't squeeze, squeeze, don't squeeze. This hand is not doing anything clever. My engine is constantly ticking over. Let's take a more complicated rhythm. Let's take a bar chord again. And what I'm going to do is make sure when you relax that you completely relax so all the strings are dead. You don't want this kind of sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this. I'm going to play semiquavers, which we count like this. 1 eander, 2 eander, 3 eander, 4 eander. And I'm going to hit beat 1, 2, 3 and 4 and mute everything else. So I'm going to get 1 eander, 2 eander, 3 eander, 4 eander. The trick when practicing this is that this hand, the strumming hand, doesn't know what this hand's doing. This hand just does its thing. It just counts out 1 eander, 2 eander, 3 eander, 4 eander. And this hand just squeezes on beat 1, 2, 3 and 4. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. What people tend to do wrong here is they tend to interrupt this hand and they go squeeze and they stop moving. And it all gets out of sync and this hand basically stalls like an engine stalling. There are exceptions to this. Sometimes when I'm doing something funky, I do sometimes change the rhythm up and put gaps in. But if you do put gaps, remember that rule that this hand never stops moving, okay? So it's constantly on the go, and if I do put gaps in, I just keep bouncing in the gap. The final rule is this: you don't have to hit every string every time. So for example, if I'm playing a chord of G, sometimes I hit the top strings, sometimes I hit the low strings, but sometimes I do a combination of both. It gives me kind of almost like a bass line feel. So instead of this, which is kind of loud and lumpy, sometimes I go. Moving between chords, I can even put a little bass line in. So from G to E minor, I could go. That's actually one of the secrets to fast, funky strumming. Most of the time, we're not hitting many strings. So if I do something fast and funky, sometimes I'm hitting a lot of strings, sometimes I'm hitting just a couple. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that and it was useful to you. If so, please click like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.